Welcome to True You Ministries. I'm Stacy Echeverria, your pastoral counselor. I am a licensed pastoral counselor whose own journey has taught me the importance of having a safe place to discuss the harder issues of life. I'm so grateful that you joined me this week. You can learn more about me and my heartfelt desire to help people much like yourself who may be at a place of pain and confusion by calling me at 626-461-3344. That's 626-461-3344, or feel free to email me at info@trueyouministries.com. Now, sit back, listen, watch, and enjoy the show. All right. Welcome back to True You Ministries. I'm Stacy Echeverria, a licensed pastoral counselor. And with me, I have Keeper Katran Whitney. He is joining me for part 2 of Sibling Bonds, Healing Through the Pages. And we had quite a wonderful conversation in part 1. Keeper, thank you for being here today.
Stacy, thank you for having me. Our
Yeah,
first part was amazing.
it really
We looked
was.
into some things, didn't we? We peeled back
Yeah,
some
we
pages.
we sure did. We sure did. And as you, before we even began, you had given a message to our audience that this is a topic that is really, really hard. And I know that the body keeps the memories, right? It stores the memories of trauma. And so I'd like to share what you shared with the audience in part 1, and that is any of what we were talking about today, which is going to be, it's very sensitive, it can be really hard, and it may be triggering for some of you. Please stop. Come back to it later when you're ready to listen to what we're discussing. We don't want you re-experiencing any of your own traumas, and if you are, we would ask that you seek some help around that. I don't do any of the body work. I do help my clients process through their own traumas, but really seek good counsel and good help and care that can help you with any of the body trauma that you're experiencing, because it does get held in the body as well. But again, we want you to take care of yourself and come back to this at a later time. We want to make sure that everyone's is implementing their own self-care as we are listening and speaking about all of this. I know as a counselor, I sit in front of clients for hours every day, and I hear about all of their traumas. And I have to exercise my own self-care to make sure that I am not experiencing it vicariously through them, right? Having trauma through them, but that I'm operating and implementing my own self-care where I can release it and continue to do the work that I'm called to. So it's really important that you do take care of yourselves today if anything that you're hearing today is triggering for you. So now I'm really excited about part 2 because we're going to talk about some other things and some practical applications to help our audience who may be experiencing some similar things that you did with your own siblings. So we had talked about overcoming the sexual trauma, and the first part of that was accepting that you were a victim of sexual trauma. And then this obviously is very challenging for men because this isn't talked about. This is primarily a women's issue, if you will. But in a lot of the counseling that I do, I'm hearing more and more and more that men have experienced sexual trauma as well. So we need to be having these conversations with the men and the women also. And then allowing ourselves, to be vulnerable in bringing this out of the shadows and into the light and talking about it. You also talked about it being in our DNA. And so that's where we ended with that. And also being in community, right? So we experience healing in community. Don't be isolated. That's the worst thing you can do for yourself. You won't resolve anything in isolation, but make sure that the community of people that you have in your circle are people that are trusted, and they're safe people where no matter what you share with them, they will have no judgment about it, but they will listen. And you're not asking them to fix you because you're not broken. You're just in a lot of pain and you're experiencing trauma. It's not for them to fix you, but what you need is for someone to listen, a place where you can talk about all the deep, dark stuff that you've experienced. And even that's the first step, I think, in the healing process is having those safe, trusted people that you can share and come just as you are. And there's no judgment and no condemnation, but that they're just there to listen. And I tell people, if you don't know what to say, don't say anything at all. You don't need to say anything. Just be there with that person because you too are also dealing with a lot of grief in this trauma because there's been losses as well. So there's a two-pronged thing that's going on here. There's the trauma and then there's the grief, and you have to process both of them. And this is what I've seen in a lot of the work that I do because I talk about that with my clients. I'm going, well, but you're experiencing grief also. Did you know that? And they're like, no. I said, but you've experienced losses and they don't even realize that they have. You and your family experienced a lot of losses in this trauma as well, Keeper, right? And so there's grief
There
of
is grief. There is, because this is from a brother's perspective,
right,
and we're talking about what brothers keep hidden.
right.
And so you've got the grief, you've got the guilt, you
Yeah.
have this sense of betrayal. And
Yeah.
because you're a brother, because you're a man, you don't want to talk about it because of the stigma.
Mm-hmm.
Women who have been sexually abused or abused also go through, I don't want to talk about it because of the stigma. Now, throw in that you are a brother who's never been given a platform
Mm-hmm.
to talk
Mm-hmm.
about this, and no one definitely
Mm-hmm.
wants to talk to you.
Right.
My greatest healers, the people that I can speak to the most freely about this, and it's it just speaks to the power of belief and just taking a chance. The people who I can speak to the most about this are two of my sisters.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
It
Mm.
it blows me away, Stacy,
Mm-hmm.
that this can happen. The time of the ministry, true you, is so key
Mm-hmm.
because it's be true to who you are, be authentic.
Right.
My sisters let me talk about my trauma in relation to my experience with them and them telling me
Right.
I cannot talk. How crazy is this?
I
That these
know.
are the people that are my healers.
Mm-hmm.
And in the
Mm-hmm.
process, we heal each other because all too often in this conversation, where it involves brothers and sisters, we are enemies in this conversation when we should be allies. I understood what
Right.
my oldest sister was saying when she said you couldn't talk about it. You boys just cannot do it. She's
Mm-hmm.
protecting herself and she's protecting my three youngest sisters. At the time, I didn't know that. And I don't know that she understood the impact of what her words were going to do to her brothers, lock us down. My brothers and I did not talk about this for 40 years amongst ourselves.
Yeah, it's a long time.
And so I'm well past that emotional healing part, right? We are well past that. We are in our heads and we're dealing with this mental trauma now because there's no
Yeah.
escape.
Right.
The the healing, it's
Mm.
it's my sisters. It's just
Yeah.
crazy.
I
But
know.
I
I
just
love it.
trusted that it was going to happen. And like your True You Ministries, it has been a ministry for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Our coming together because for me and my brothers, we were guilty through gender proximity, which is to
Right.
say, what was between the legs of their predator? we have the same thing, which automatically made us guilty, which of
Yeah.
course we weren't. But I get
Right.
it. It took me
Yeah.
years to figure that part out. Almost 30 years
Mhm.
to that's what's going on here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it's the healers, like you said, you've got to find the healers, and mine were the unexpected source. Oh my goodness.
But I love that. I love that because there was a relationship that started up again with your sisters, and it
Yeah,
became and it becomes a more authentic one, right?
yeah,
The sisters that were the sister who said you can't talk about it uh in her own pain, right? Hurting people hurt people. We
right.
understand that. And most likely went through her own healing process and continues to be in it and is in a different place in her life and was open to having the conversation. I love that that happened. I do. I think there's just something so beautiful about that where there was a lot of pain unintentionally, obviously, because it was coming from her
Yeah,
own pain,
yeah,
right? That you experienced and you felt locked and couldn't get out, and yet she had the key, and she used the key, and you're out, and you're free, and
yeah,
there's a relationship now, right?
yeah. I have wonderful relationships with three of my sisters. As I said, these are the three that contribute to the book.
Right.
One of the youngest, the twins, I haven't spoken to in a long time. She's,
Yeah.
as I say, processing. Two
Yeah.
of my brothers are still
Mhm.
processing and
Yeah.
dealing with their trauma in a very different
Sure.
way.
Sure.
Uh, they will figure it out, hopefully.
Yeah.
The getting to that conversation uh,
Yes. Yeah.
unlocked so much.
Yeah. 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 And it's a hard conversation to have, but it was one that was necessary, right? And so in that, uh,
Yeah,
you shared your
hard
experience, didn't you?
conversation, all right.
Yeah.
Hard
Yeah.
conversation. Like we had talked in part one, to find the courage or the strength. I don't know what it is. The audacity more than anything that I'm going to talk to them and tell them I'm going to write this book from a brother's perspective. I I I think it was a for me it was a crazy step to just think that they would be anything other than angry,
Right.
and yet I got nothing but love and grace. And I over time that's what typically happens. Time,
Mhm.
there's an evolution that we go
Sure.
through with our pain and our trauma and our healing, which is oftentimes what it takes and why you really
Right.
need to be patient with yourself. We
Right.
evolve, we
Right.
grow and see things differently. And
Mhm.
they did that and they got to a place like the sister my second sister, of course you should write a book. That was an evolution for her.
You're right.
That took a lot of time. My oldest sister said you can't talk about it. For her to say okay, and then follow that up with yes, I will contribute to the book
Yeah.
because I decided. I said, oh, okay. I know this is a brother's story from the brother's perspective, and understand it's a hard read. It's difficult. It is not a People magazine article. Trust me,
Right.
but it's
Yeah.
helpless. Book two is
Yeah.
hopefulness. We're talking about the hope part that you and I so
Yeah.
love, the word hope.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
for me to then go back and say, you know what, I do not want our family experience to end in tragedy. We can help so many families across the globe
Mhm.
if we if you are willing to contribute something. I don't care what it is. You could
Right.
blast me all day in the book. I don't care. That's what you need to do. That's what we need to do to help our healing.
Mhm. Sure.
And to hear them say, yes, I'd love to contribute was just another one of those moments. No, I don't want you to contribute.
Yeah.
But then because you're like, I'm asking for you to contribute, and you're expecting no. And then when they say yes, I want to help you heal,
I
and you're like, but no, I don't want you to, because you're still supposed to be angry with me. It is
Right.
such a
Right.
crazy position. But that's what
Yeah.
happens when you decide you are really going to do the work.
Yeah. Yeah,
And I'm
absolutely.
willing to do the work because the psychological and the emotional impact of everything is just telling you no, it could never happen.
Right. Right. And it takes a certain amount of risk in this process, right? It's a risk when you move toward having the hard conversations and you've got the story going on in your head, right? You're telling yourself something. Well, if I ask, hey, or you tell them I'm going to be writing this book, and you're expecting no, you're expecting to be met with anger, you're expecting everything negative, and you get yes, there was a
Because
risk
what
that
are
you
you
took.
doing to them? What am I doing to them? The reality is, I am triggering them.
Of course.
They're not expecting this. They're not expecting me to say this. And I
Right.
am triggering. I am causing flashbacks. I am
Yeah.
causing my sisters to think, he took me into the closet and closed the door. And I just remember zip, and I am
Yeah.
bringing all
Yeah.
that back to them.
Right.
And yet I'm trying to
Right.
do something good for everyone, but I know it's going to be triggering. And then,
Yeah.
of course, it's going to be triggering for me just to,
Sure.
I don't want to talk about this, but I need to talk
Right.
about it. I have to talk about it. I need to talk to someone. And you're the only people. Ultimately, I'm back to you're the people I need
Yeah.
to speak to. And
Exactly.
so you are
Exactly.
so much, but
Yeah.
you must go through that process. As my brother so fond of saying, you have to go through to get through. That's the only way.
I love it. It's true. And one of the things that I tell my clients too is that nothing ever goes away until it's resolved. So how to resolve? We have to talk about it. We have to acknowledge that it's there. People will avoid. I know we've talked about, right? We were taught, right, to fear the hard conversations. Right. We've talked, religion, politics, sex, sensitive topics. And it makes me wonder why do we fear, or why do people, well, we can't talk about this and we can't talk about that, and I think to myself, well, that's a little controlling, isn't it?
Yeah.
If we don't talk about it, this is what I say to people. I'm like, we know where our country's at right now, and it's really sad. And it distresses me, and it makes me really, really sad. And I think about, well, I'm that person where, okay, I have my viewpoints, whatever. You have your viewpoints, and maybe we're not on the same page, and that's fine. My whole thing is, I like moving toward people with curiosity, and
Hmm.
that's what we're not doing. We need to move toward one another with curiosity, because every person has a story. And I like hearing the stories. How did you come to believe this? Help me understand this. If we
Yeah.
don't move toward with curiosity, there's no relationship. And we can't have relationship, right? So
There's
be
no
curious.
relationship. There's no growth. There's no
Nothing.
tolerance. There's no
Right.
understanding. Like you said, we
No.
could ultimately still end up, you're in this corner and that, and I'm in that corner. However, we have a better understanding of each other. We are no longer the
Exactly.
same people
Right.
to each
Right.
other. We have
Right.
grown, and how
Yeah.
we now approach each other
Hmm.
is I guess is a more worldly view. Like I said, you may
Yeah.
ultimately still not like where my position is,
Right.
but we understand each other, and
Yeah.
it actually
Yeah.
allows for in the future more of that conversation to exist.
Right. Right. Absolutely. I was talking with a client yesterday, and yesterday was a difficult day for me. I was just feeling all kinds of things. And I do. I'm a human being, and I don't always have it all, I do put on my game face when I am meeting with clients. But she and I have a really special connection, and she asked me how I was doing. And I was having a difficult day yesterday. And I said, my heart is very distressed over some of the actions that I am seeing, with people being destructive, and all of that. It's very distressing for me. And I know I could choose to be really angry about it. That's not going to change anything.
mm,
And I said, they're doing what they're doing. Some of the stuff is very wicked, and it's just evil. And I said they're doing it because there's an absence of God in their lives.
mm,
And I think when, for me, even in my own healing work, what the Lord has been able to help me do is I can see what's going on with people, and I immediately think, okay, what's their pain point? What's the
mhm,
pain? Because they're acting out in this way because there's pain. And so when we approach people in that way, we can exercise compassion toward them. I'm not excusing what they're doing, that's very destructive, but I am moving toward understanding. There is pain here. Okay, Lord, do you want me to offer something here? Can you use me as an agent of healing here or something? And if he says, not right now, not here, okay, I trust you, God. But I'm always looking at how can I be in a world that is hurt and broken, and people are in a lot of pain. How can something I say or something that I do begin healing in that person's life because they're hurt, you know? And when you're not allowed to talk about all that trauma that you experienced, and then now we're having to keep this bottled up as well, it keeps you in a very stuck place. And what it does is it stunts your emotional growth when you're not
mhm.
allowed to talk about it and you're not allowed to share your pain with anyone else. And again, I would just caution everyone, when you're ready to start talking about your own traumas and your own pain, you make sure that you have a really good support system around you of people that you trust, that will not be judgmental, and that are, compassionate and kind and understanding. These are safe people, and they're going to be really important, in that healing process. So, looking at these, these hard conversations, and why aren't we allowing ourselves to have the hard conversations? I think we build up so much fear around it that we are unwilling to take the risk to have those conversations, and then we miss out on getting to know that other human being. And what a loss that would
Absolutely.
be if we, right? It's such a loss
Yeah.
when we don't allow ourselves to take that risk and say, hey, I'm really curious about this, help me understand what you're thinking about it, because I don't
There's
understand, but I
also this, there's also this, to me, this element of power and control.
right, exactly.
When you're telling people they can't talk about it because it's too difficult, well, who's benefiting from that? The people who don't want you to talk about it.
Exactly.
When I got to the point of talking to my sisters, it it just opened up a whole new world of hope. And I think it's important that I point out to people. My book series, first book is helplessness. Book two is hopefulness that I'm writing now, and then there's happiness because I'm in a happiness place right now. It has
Mhm.
took a lot of time. My story and my story of my family is one of hope. It is one of triumph. It is one of resilience. It is one of survivorship or hood. I'm not sure which one is the actual one to use, but we are thriving. And so when if you aren't willing to have the hard conversation, you have to ask yourself, what is it that you are afraid of? You know, you can't lay that responsibility on someone else. Well, they don't want me to talk about it. Well, no. Let's back this up a second. What
Right.
is it that I'm afraid of because I am giving in to that particular viewpoint because it serves me.
Right.
When what you
Right.
need serving you is just being the true you, just
Exactly.
letting people know where you're at. Once again, they will, some will be uncomfortable. And there's always a time and a place
Mm,
for everything. You can't always have these
right.
conversations during Thanksgiving, but you can
No.
have them, you can have these conversations after,
Right.
after you
Exactly.
reconnect. But it gives
Right.
everyone a chance to reassess who they are, but more importantly, you learn who you are. You learn that there is an inner strength about you that you may
Yeah.
not have realized existed. You own your space, having a hard conversation. That's just one of the benefits of it. For you, there's so much personal growth in
Mhm.
having hard conversations
Mhm.
because at the end of the
Mhm.
day, those are really the ones that matter.
They did, yes.
Everything else is just commentary about our lives. But
Right.
the hard conversations, those are the conversations that define who you
Mhm.
are. And how do you want
Mhm.
your life to be defined?
Right. Right.
One of I'm just going to stand back and just let it go, or I'm going to
Mhm.
own who I am and speak my authentic self.
Right, exactly. And that's so true, and I think too, the why another reason why, there's fear around having these hard conversations is could be, well, if they find out about me and the true me, they may not accept me, so there may be some perceived rejection. There's a lot of shame too that can be flooding that will not allow us to move forward in that. And so all that keeps us isolated, right? And there is an enemy of our soul. Let me just say that. He does not want us to be in community because when we are in community, the truth comes out. And it's in the isolation where we can fill our heads with all these lies, right? I won't be accepted, they'll never understand, I'm the only one that's experienced this, I'm in so much shame, I'm such a bad person. And
Hmm.
shame has nothing to do with who you are. Who you are is not what you've done. Who you are hangs firmly on who God says you are. That never
Yeah,
changes. And so that's a lot of the identity work that I do with my clients, where I'm like, what you've done does not define you,
no, no,
right?
it doesn't.
So
It's
overcoming, all of
it's a
that.
blip in your time. It is just something
It is.
that is momentary. You can
Right.
turn all that around by just making a U-turn and say, I'm going to do something different. It
Yeah.
may be that you go back and ap- apologize to someone. You can
Right.
make that turn. It might be uncomfortable, but it makes a difference. Um,
Yeah.
Oftentimes,
Yeah.
we will hang on our negative past for so long, and then that can become a generational thing that you hand down.
Exactly. Exactly.
And
Yeah.
that started happening to me until I had this understanding I need to talk. My stepfather, when my mother married him, to tell you how generational trauma can be and just handing it
Mhm.
down without having
Mhm.
the conversation and the willingness to heal.
Mhm.
My mother had given us his last name. So when my wife and I got married, we had a different last name. And I remember when my son came home from school one day, he was in first grade, and I read his report card and I saw the name at the top of the report card,
Mhm.
Stacy. I started getting angry when I saw
Oh,
because
wow.
we've always had a hyphenated name. Catherine is my wife's last name. Whitney is my last name. So our
Okay.
last name was Catherine something else. I'm not
Mhm.
going to say his name here. But I
Yeah.
started getting angry when I saw the name. And I realized my anger at just seeing my son's name was his last name on the end. I am transferring negative energy down to my son who was absolutely innocent.
Right.
So we have to be very, very careful in how we handle our trauma because this is just another one of those things that manifests in a way I did not expect. I am handing
Yeah.
this down to him. My anger is now about to become a generational trauma for an innocent, beautiful boy. He
Right.
has no idea. And I imagine,
Yeah.
some of that was being transferred to my wife without me even knowing about it because I
Mm.
hated seeing that name. And it was
Mm.
a part of me until I just made the U-turn. Nope, we're getting rid of it. We're going to go
Yeah.
to a different last name. That's where the Whitney part comes in, which is actually my mother's maiden name because her family, they're wonderful people. And
Oh, love that.
we just feel really, really comfortable taking my mother's last name, even though she did what she did. But her family represents something much bigger and greater to me. So that's why we went
Oh,
with
wow.
Whitney.
Yeah, so meaningful, right? And, when you talk about making that U-turn, what I wanted to share is that that U-turn takes a lot of courage, but it doesn't mean there's an absence of fear. There is fear and fear is there, and yet we still move forward and we still go toward. Um, and and like I said in part one, we tend to blow things up a lot larger than they really are. We make them seem a lot worse than they end up being sometimes. We're telling stories in our head about these things, and we have to really think about, okay, what is this really about? Right? it's
Hmm.
it's always, when people have this fear, I'm like, what is it really about? Fear comes out in different ways. It's expressed in many different ways, right? So in the work that I do, with people that have anxiety, or they're worried, or they're stressed out, or they've got some unhealthy coping behavior, or anger and all of that, and I'm like, well, this is fear playing out. What is it really about? What are you really afraid of? Right? And we get to the work. It's not e- easily identifiable for some people, and that's okay. But we get there. So, and you've probably heard this: fear is false evidence appearing real, and so we have
Oh,
to get
sure.
to the truth. It's always getting to
Yeah.
the truth. What's really true here? I wanted to talk about with you, and I really have enjoyed our time together so far. I'd love to talk about emotional health for men, because we don't talk enough about that either. It's yeah, and I have a lot of male clients, with the couples work that I do, and I have some in my private practice as well. And again, I was like, well, I don't live life like a man. I don't experience some of the things that men experience, but I'm like, but wait, they're human beings. I'm a human being. Okay, not a problem. They experience, the fears and the insecurities that women do. They may have body image issues also. I know a lot of women have that, but men have that also, right? But really talking about emotional health for men. And I can say this: I know with my dad's generation, and he was in the traditionalist generation, they didn't talk about anything, and everything got stuffed down. Now I'm in the baby boomers, and even with the baby boomers, even those men were just, what was told them was, suck it up. Just suck it up and keep going. But we've got the pendulum that swung so far on the other end, where it's all about the feelings. And I'm like, I understand, the feelings and stuff like that, but we cannot be ruled by what we're feeling. We need to manage them well. So I'd like for you to share a little bit more about, emotional health for men and your thoughts around that.
Well, as I said, mine is all based on my own personal experience. I am in that baby boomer generation, so yes, I get it. I really
Hmm.
do. And we are in this time where so much is being driven by our feelings.
Yes.
And that can be debilitating, whether
Yeah.
people recognize it or not. Because if everything is just being driven by your feelings, then you oftentimes don't take the necessary steps that require courage and allow for growth to happen.
Right.
The emotional health for men can is very different, I think, than it is for women. Imagine,
Hmm.
if you will, you're a little boy and you're told boys don't cry. And
Right.
she said, uh, deal with it.
Hmm.
Sisters being emotional because that's what girls do.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
You, your job is to, no matter what is going on, you have to always be strong. You have to always be tough. And that is can be the beginnings of toxic masculinity. When society reinforces that,
Mhm.
and who in society is reinforcing that? Who controls most of what happens today, at least? Who controls much of what happens? Men. Now,
Mhm.
what man in power wants to show that they are weak? So you have to emulate
Mhm. Mhm.
that 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 stigma that society places on men and boys. I think is
Right.
the beginning of a lot of our challenges, and yet
Right.
we as men we support it because
Mhm.
we're supposed to be
Mhm.
tough. We're supposed to be King Kong. We're supposed to be all
Right.
these great things. We tend to not even recognize the feminine side of us that is so critical to us being whole, which is one of the reasons why oftentimes women can have these emotional conversations with each other so much better than men because they've been
Mhm.
told from little girl we're supposed to be emotional. That's what girls do. Yeah, blah 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 blah. And yet, there's an advantage for
Right.
them when they get older. They can talk to each other. Guys don't talk to each other about this
I
stuff.
know they don't.
Ain't just
I know they
no
don't.
way. But we're
Yeah.
starting to see trickles of it coming in. When we now
Yeah.
have celebrities, be they actors or sports figures, men talking about the times they were sexually abused. It is opening up doors for a much grander conversation around emotional. It is
Yeah.
moving from the realm of mental health to emotional health, which is why I'm so glad more we are seeing more and more celebrities do this because oftentimes we take our cues from what
From them.
celebrities, yeah,
Yeah.
especially the generation, the generation beneath us.
Right.
When we're looking at
Right.
the social media generation, so much of it
Right.
is feelings, 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 feelings that you
Yeah. Yeah.
stop a lot of your overall growth because everything is just locked in your feelings. Well,
Yeah.
I'm happy to say that men are moving in a much better direction with this, but the emotional health, as we talked about in part one, brings in community. You've mentioned the word
Mhm.
community
Mhm.
2 or 3 times on the
Yeah.
importance of that. That is what emotional health gives you. It says you belong. You are a
Right.
part of. We are here to
Right.
help each other. We cannot grow and be better as a community unless everyone is feeling good as a community. So the emotional aspect of this is the most critical part.
Yeah.
For me,
Yeah.
the like I said, it took me 40 years, and it wasn't until my wife said that you're a victim. I didn't even recognize that I was dealing with any emotional trauma.
Right. Right. Yeah.
It just never even occurred to me
Right.
that that was even possible.
Right.
But as soon as it did, and I said the next day I went to Google and I looked, and what she was doing
Mhm.
is that fall into the category of child
Yeah.
sexual abuse. And it wasn't black and white. It's like wow,
Yeah. Yeah.
it it released me in many ways that I've had to overcome a lot of traumas growing up. I was a chronic stutterer. I still do it to this day, and I was teased mercilessly by my brothers and sisters as siblings can do. And yet, it locked me down from being a communicative person. I just
Right.
didn't want to talk to any.
Sure.
And I began to realize the older I get, it was important. It's just something I figured out on my own. I have to talk because talking is an emotional release for me. Even if
Right.
no one agrees with me, at least I can get this off my chest and I
Right.
can feel better about myself. At least I said what I needed to say, and I can release that. And I think men emotionally need to say what they need to say. It doesn't always
Right.
mean you're angry or you're lashing out. It's just talk about who you
Yeah.
are and what you are experiencing in a real way. There's so
Right.
much power in that.
There really, really is. I appreciate you saying all of that. I think about Jesus in the Bible, right? He wept, he was emotional, he was sad. We see him with all the range of emotions as well. And
Mm,
so, where did we get that it's not okay for men to cry? That's the women's arena over there. They're allowed to be emotional over here, but the men are not. And that's just such a lie. It's because
mhm.
they're human beings. They have feelings as well. They experience, happiness and joy, and they grieve losses. Well, if they do, they experience losses and anger, and all the range of emotions that are available. The emotions tell us where we're at. But then we have to move toward uh navigating it in a healthy way and not be ruled by them, but our emotions are telling us something's going on, and pay attention,
Mhm.
right? So I love this quote from C.S. Lewis: pain is a megaphone to a deaf world. And it is. And we need to pay attention to that, right? People are in pain, and we all have a story. And I think about when I'm out in public, and there's a server at a restaurant, and I'm like, what is going on with her today? And so I'm extra kind, and how are you doing? And oh, thank you, I appreciate that, kind of thing, and trying to be a ray of sunshine for someone who's probably having a bad day. We don't know what people are going through. So it doesn't take a lot of energy from us to extend some
Mhm.
kindness to someone else, like a smile. Just smiling at someone says to them they're seen, they're acknowledged. Maybe they're
Because at the
experiencing.
end of the day, we all want the same thing, man, woman, boy, girl. We all want the same thing. We want to be seen. We want to be
Exactly.
heard.
Want to be
We
heard.
want to be understood. And we want to
Exactly.
move through life in a positive,
Right.
self-fulfilling
Right.
direction. We
Right.
all want.
Absolutely. And I don't get it right every day. I know you don't get it right every day. We, you know,
Well, I
we're
beg to differ. No,
That's
I
really
definitely
funny.
think I get it right every
Right,
day.
we don't get it right every day, and I'll tell you this, let me
Uh,
say this, I'll say this, when we don't get it right, I know what I do, I go back and I'll apologize, and I'll say, "Look, this is not an excuse, I was just having such a rotten day, and I was a little bit short with you, and I'm really, really sorry about that." That really goes a long way when we can acknowledge, hey, listen, I messed up today. I am human. It's not an excuse. I'm really, really
yeah.
sorry. An apology can go a long way, just recognizing it and acknowledging it and taking responsibility, right?
It goes a
Uh,
long way for both parties, but more specifically for the person who's apologizing because they can walk away and say, I'm okay. That wasn't
yeah,
too bad. I did
yeah,
okay. Instead of,
yeah,
you know, taking on this fear that
yeah,
something bad is going to happen or I'm going to be uncomfortable by not
yeah,
apologizing. It is
yeah,
empowering. There's
yeah.
a book that's maybe probably 20 years old by Dr. Susan Jeffers called Feel the
Hmm.
Fear and Do It Anyway.
I love
When I
that
read that
title.
book some 20 years ago, it was like a lightning bolt just struck. Feel the fear and do it anyway, because ultimately that's what you have to do if you want to heal yourself. There is going to be
Exactly.
a tremendous amount of fear, but
Yeah.
feel it, acknowledge it, accept it, do it anyway.
Yep. I
And
agree.
then
The
there's an empowering aspect to it afterward.
Absolutely. I know in the work that I do with my clients, in the workbook that I use with them, one of the key thoughts in it is you have to feel to heal. And it's true. You have to
No
feel
doubt,
your
no doubt.
feelings in order to heal them. First of all, you need to acknowledge that they're there and that you are actually feeling it, and not have any weird stuff about it, thinking, "Oh, I shouldn't be feeling this way." No, hang on. You're feeling this way for a reason and it's telling you something, and so we need to uncover what that is, right? There are
Hmm.
no bad feelings. There are no bad there it's neither right nor wrong. It just is. So now let's explore together what's really
Yeah.
going on here, you know?
Let's
And
unpack it, everyone. Let's unpack all of it. Let's deal with it. Yeah, I agree.
Right, right. I tell people, I'm like, you know what? Are you tired carrying around that set of luggage all your life? It's time to unpack all
That's
the
right.
luggage, unpack it all,
That's funny.
and leave it
That's
where it
great.
belongs and stop dragging it into the future. There are people that just drag it into the future. And I think about legacy when I work with my clients, especially if they're married and they've got children. I ask them, what do you want to leave your children? In
Mm,
the work that you're doing, right? This will impact future generations. This is about legacy. So how will it be different for your kids
mm.
and their kids and generations to come? It will be different if you continue on this healing path. And so I help them consider future. What will that future look like with the work that I am doing right now? And it's hopeful if they
Absolutely.
continue in it,
Yeah.
you know. Yeah. So, gosh, I love this. I know we can talk for days. And this is just such an amazing topic, and I appreciate your courage in moving toward it, and being someone that is, a pioneer in this, right? You're paving the way for the men to have these conversations, and it's so needed. Thank you so much for reaching out to me, and us having our initial conversations, and just being able to, provide that hope for men, and families. It's not just the men. We know women are experiencing this as well, and so the takeaway here is move toward it, hold on to that hope, and know that freedom is available in this, but you need to be talking about it. And so I want to share with everyone again, uh, Keeper's information. His email is keepercw at dot author at gmail.com. That email again is keepercw dot author at gmail.com. And his website that has a lot of really great things on it is keeper catranwhitney.com. I know I mispronounced it the last time, but it's keepercatranwhitney.com. You've been such a pleasure to having you on the show, and I know we can, like I said, we can talk for hours on end, and I'll probably invite you back again. We may have some other things to discuss, but thank you for being here, and to all of you that are needing that help, reach out. You can reach out to Keeper. You can also reach out to me as well. I can be reached at my website at trueyouministries.com, or you can call me at 626-461-3344, or email me at info@trueyouministries.com. And I do provide a free 20-minute consultation. You can talk to me about whatever you want. Now is the opportunity for all of you that are thinking about taking that next step in accepting Jesus into your heart. Now is a good time. Don't be alone in the struggles that you have. Don't be alone in your pain. Jesus is waiting with arms wide open. He has the answers for you. He loves you with an everlasting love. Again, Keeper, thank you so much for being here. So appreciate you.
Stacy,
And
thank you. And through you
yeah.
ministries, it has been one of the most enjoyable shows I have ever participated in. This
Oh, that means a
this was
lot.
crazy.
Oh, thank you.
It's like we've known each other for years. It's like
I
this is
know. I
this
love
is
when that
really good stuff.
happens.
Good
Yeah,
stuff.
thank you so much. I appreciate your kind words, and I absolutely love the work that you're doing. And to all of you that have been watching and listening, may the Lord bless you today. You've been listening to True You Ministries with me, Stacy Echeverria, your pastoral counselor. I'm a licensed pastoral counselor whose own journey has taught me the importance of having a safe place to discuss the harder issues of life. You can learn more about me and my heartfelt desire to help people, much like yourself, who may be at a place of pain and confusion by calling me at 626-461-3344. That's 626-461-3344, or feel free to email me at info@trueyouministries.com. That email once again is info@trueyouministries.com. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and may God richly bless you.